Welcome to another episode of 40 Minutes in the Old Testament. 40 Minutes in the Old Testament is a 1517 Podcast Network podcast. You can go to 1517.org/podcast and check out all the other podcasts that are living over there. While you're over there, make sure you check out everything else that 1517 is doing. By the time this releases, we'll be creeping right up on the Flower Mound event. That's in the Dallas area. Chad and I are going to both be there. That is the first weekend in September. And we're going to be talking about what happens when people encounter Jesus. Eric Sorensen will also be there. Kelsey Clambaro will be there. It's going to be a good time. So, come hang out. Hear some talks. We're going to do a live podcast. It's going to be fun. There's a link in the show notes, and you can get yourself registered and come on out. Chad, we are in Ecclesiastes chapter 9. We kind of ended last episode by... Solomon was saying, hey, there might be some reasons to obey a king. Maybe God made a promise to him. Maybe you don't like him, but maybe you like that promise. So maybe you're going to expect God to be faithful, even if your king is kind of someone you don't like. And so maybe you could obey his commands for that reason. He also says that, look, think that there's only one thing that you can really do, since you can't really control the days of your life, or you can't control the justice system. The best thing you could do is, kind of enjoy the small things, kind of eat, drink, be merry, find some joy and that sort of stuff. And it kind of, that seemed kind of, kind of positive, like sort of like this simple little key to finding some joy in your life. Solomon's going to make the turn, though, again, per usual, where instead of just saying, you know what, guys, and that is the end of it. Like, enjoy the small stuff because, you're not going to be here long. And then that you're not going to be there long. He starts dwelling on that. And we're going to see where that leads him today, because he's going to come to the conclusion of, well, you do know what's coming for all of us.
Yeah, in fact, I think it was the commentary by Longman I was reading this morning that said that these, especially these first 10 verses in chapter 9, perhaps, in fact, the whole chapter is the most depressing part of Ecclesiastes. So, if our listeners are having a really bad day and they thought, you know what, to cheer me up, I'm going to turn on 40 Minutes in the Old Testament. Maybe not the best day to listen to 40 Minutes in the Old Testament. But hey, maybe we can weave in some good news in the midst of all this pessimism and bad news that he's got to tell us in these first few verses. So I don't know if I want to read all 10 verses, but I'll start out here reading at least the first couple. So Ecclesiastes 9. But all this I laid to heart, examining it all, how the righteous and the wise and their deeds are in the hand of God. Whether it is love or hate, man does not know. Both are before him. It is the same for all, since the same event happens to the righteous and the wicked, to the good and the evil, to the clean and the unclean, to him who sacrifices and him who does not sacrifice. As the good one is, so is the sinner. And he who swears is as he who shuns an oath. This is an evil in all that is done under the sun, that the same event happens to all. This is the gospel of the Lord.
Yeah. If you're wondering, what event is this?
Yeah, what's he talking about?
Yeah, it's the last event. It's that death event. It's not birth. Also happens to all. That's not the one he's talking.
Yes,
that's not the one he's talking about.
No.
It seems that he's saying that, like, look, this is the. It's interesting some of the parallels between the things that Solomon finds frustrating, or that tend to make life sort of meaningless in his eyes, are kind of the things that, like, Job's friends say aren't the way it is, and that Job then has to come back and say, no, that is the way it is. So, like, Ecclesiastes would be a good book for Job's friends to read before they go and counsel someone. Because, what's Solomon saying here? He's saying that, okay, listen, whether you're righteous or wicked, whether you're wise or foolish, whether you're clean or unclean, whether you spend your whole life sacrificing things to God, or whether you never sacrificed anything, doesn't matter. Like, none of this changes the final outcome. And to him, this seems like this is a great evil. He's like, I mean, because this is how powerless you really are ultimately, right? Is that swear an oath, don't swear an oath. Guess what? You're gonna die.
Yeah, I do like the fact that verse 3, he says, "This is an evil in all that is done under the sun, that the same event happens to all." Uh, I mean, maybe that's not exactly what he intends, but he certainly does speak truth in the sense that, you know, I don't think that we, at least always, speak truthfully when it comes to death, because we've, yeah, culturally anyway, we've tended to adopt the idea that the death is, just kind of natural. It's part of the circle of life, or whatever you want to call it. And you don't, unless it's like a intentional taking of someone's life. So, either murder or manslaughter or whatever. Usually people aren't referring to death as evil.
Right.
But yeah, but I mean, that is I don't think that's something we can emphasize quite enough, because it has kind of become a commonplace, certainly culturally. And this, anything happening culturally just creeps into the church, either quickly or slowly, where people begin to talk about, natural death. Well, it's just, that's just the way things go. This is the circle of life, whatnot. No, death is enemy, and death is the enemy, always has been the enemy, never is natural, always is evil. Now, maybe that's not exactly what Koheleth intends here when he says this is an evil, but it is true. It is true nonetheless. I think he is emphasizing here the fact that in this frustration he has with life under the sun, that part of this frustration, if in fact not the main frustration that he has with life under the sun, is that it doesn't really matter, which of these categories you fall into: righteous, wise, wicked, good, evil, clean, unclean. You're all going to end up the same place. Death democratizes us all. So because of that, I mean, this is kind of a very, very pessimistic part of Koheleth. But I mean, it fits the tenor of everything that he started from the very beginning, right? Vanity of vanities, all is vanity, because life without the resurrection, as you pointed out, Dan, many times, life without the resurrection renders everything in this life futile, vain,
Yeah.
meaningless.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you decide, and rightly so, that death is not natural, there's not like such a thing. That death is the result of something wrong, and death itself is evil. Then you might say, well, what could you do to avoid this evil? Surely it would be a bunch of good, and then maybe you could avoid this evil. And you find out that actually, no, it doesn't matter. Like, how much good you do, or how righteous you are, or how clean you are. Uh, there is no good that you can do to avoid this evil, and so he thinks that also is evil, right? Like, so, like, it's the idea that death is evil, and the fact that you can't be good enough to avoid it, that's also evil. Like, what kind of evil is that? Like, there's an evil that you can't avoid. Well, this is just evil on top of evil.
Yeah, that's doubly evil, because there's a lot of bad things in life we at least think we can avoid by, being wise or planning properly or doing the right thing. And yeah, sometimes that works out. Maybe you can avoid the bad of bankruptcy by being financially responsible or
Yeah.
whatever it is. Okay, fine. Do that good and avoid that bad. But in the end, there is a bad that's coming that you can be, you know, you can out Mother Teresa, Mother Teresa. And it really just not going to matter. You're going to end up dead anyway.
Yeah, you just end up
And
dead, a dead person who never declared bankruptcy.
yes, right, right.
Like, I guess you
Uh,
win then, huh?
you win
That's
then. Yeah, and I think this is interesting. It's worth pointing out too. So this is toward the end of verse 1. So he starts out saying, I laid this to heart. I studied all this. I examined it, how the righteous and the wise and their deeds are in the hand of God. And then he says, whether it is love or hate, man does not know. Both are before him. Now, uh, there are a few who would argue that this love or hate is in reference to human love or hate. I don't think that's right. And the majority of the people I checked on this too agree that this is talking about divine love or hate, which is pretty fascinating from a theological perspective because he is saying, listen, uh, whether you're righteous or whether you're wise or whatever you are, what you're doing, your deeds, they're under God's control. They're in the hand of God. Now, what does he think about you? Well, we don't know. Is it love? Man does not know. Is it hate? Man does not know. The, both of these possibilities are before him. Now, I think that Kohelet doesn't say this, but I think that more than anything, that perspective more than anything else, is an evil that is under the sun. If you don't know what God thinks about you, whether it's love or hate that He has towards you, I mean, I can't think of anything worse than that. I mean, that's worse than death itself because that renders your whole life just this cataclysm of anxiety. How do I know how I stand with God? What do have I been so bad He doesn't want anything to do with me? Have I been so good that He's impressed with me? I don't know. So for me anyway, that's the ultimate bad, not knowing where we stand with God. And that's why when you take statements like that and you put them beside the gospel, that it doesn't become just good news, it becomes the best news imaginable. Well, it turns out he doesn't hate you, he loves you, and here's how much he loves you. So that truth of the gospel is going to put all of his kind of this pessimism, these opening verses, in a completely different light.
Well, too, and like for Solomon understands this that this is a binary thing, too. Um, God certainly isn't like indifferent, right? So like these are the
Yeah.
options. Like the options are he loves you or he hates you, and this is support. I mean, this is a biblically sound idea here. Like God is
Mm-hmm.
not just sort of neutral towards anything, right? So it he loves you. He either loves us or he hates us. This is what it's going to be. And yeah, and it seems like if you're just reading this and you find out that no matter how you are or what you act or whether you sacrifice to him or not, uh, that you're all going to die, might make you think that it's hate. I mean,
Yeah,
like,
sure.
you
Oh,
know,
yeah. Yeah, depending on how well your life is going, depending on how, I mean, your kind of your personality, whether you're more optimistic or more pessimistic, and depending on a whole lot of circumstances in life, if you try and just kind of interpret God's attitude toward you based upon what you experience or what you see in the world, there's actually a pretty good likelihood you're going to come out thinking God hates you, or at least hates humanity in general, because there's every bad event in the world could be interpreted to mean either that God is against us or I don't know if it's better or worse that God is apathetic. He doesn't really care. He's kind of just this, you know, deistic kind of God who's removed himself from creation and has really no goodwill or ill will toward us. So yeah, interpreting just human events is not going to get you into what is happening in the heart of God.
yeah,
Most likely it's going to give you a very dark view of God's attitude towards humanity.
yeah. I mean, again, if you don't have the resurrection, then you don't have the truth that because God loves you, that He has defeated death and transformed death into a doorway where you walk through it into eternal life, where death has no power. But if you don't have that, then death is just the final thing. That's just the end.
I mean, just think of it this way. We have the gospel. We know we know that we are reconciled to God in Jesus Christ. We know there's no condemnation for those who are in Christ. We know that for the Christian, death is that doorway into the presence of God. We know all these things to be true. And still, knowing all these things to be true, and still, uh, life is hard. And there's plenty of times where we cry out in the Psalms, why and where are you and how long? So, even knowing the gospel, it's difficult at times to fight off the urge to question whether God is truly for us.
Yeah.
So just imagine if you didn't know the gospel how easy it is to slip into this pessimistic perspective that says either we don't know or God is certainly against us and not for us. Okay, so off to that uh, glowing start. Let's see what he has to say after that. So we're going to pick it up here with verse, we're kind of halfway through verse 3, I suppose. So I'll start out with the beginning of verse 3. This is an evil in all that is done under the sun, but the same event happens to all. Of course, he's talking about death. Also, he goes on, also the hearts of the children of man are full of evil, and madness is in their hearts while they live. And after that, they go to the dead. But he who is joined with all the living has hope, for a living dog is better than a dead lion. One of my favorite proverbs, by the way. For the living know they will die, but the dead know nothing, and they have no more reward, for the memory of them is forgotten. Their love and their hate and their envy have already perished, and forever they have no more share in all that is done under the sun. I don't think it gets less pessimistic. I think it gets more pessimistic as he goes along here.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know.
things
Don't
are
get
not
this.
looking up.
Don't get confused. This for I don't know. You can maybe read this with like I don't know some kind of like New Testament eyes or something, and take away something I don't think it's saying. You know, so it's like, hey, you want to be one of these people who is joined with the living and has hope, and you're like, no, man, that's not what he's saying. He's not saying that you've been like united with like the resurrected Christ or something like that. Like he's saying, listen, it like a dog in the street that's still alive is better than like the mightiest lion who ever lived that's dead
The
because
king of beasts.
the dog has like days in front of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the
Yep.
lion has nothing. So, you know, it's yeah, that's what it is, and so it's not like he's not talking about some kind of eternal hope here or anything. This hope
Yeah.
is very
Yeah.
temporal. Like once you're dead, you have no hope to see tomorrow. But you know, if you're still alive, you're like, I might see tomorrow. So
Yeah.
that's nice.
Yeah. This is a good case, good example where if you, I mean, certainly this can be read through New Testament eyes, and you could take this as a springboard for talking about true life and true hope in Christ and all of that. Maybe you could use it in a homiletical sense in that way, but but contextually, yeah, this is not optimistic. This is not talking about a living hope that we have in Christ. This is him doubling down on the fact that life under the sun, life without the resurrection, is utterly hopeless. So, not only kind of going back to the beginning here, the second half of verse 3, not only is the same event going to happen to everybody, which is, of course, bad, but before we get there, while we're on the way to our own place in the cemetery, what's happening inside us? The hearts of the children of man are full of evil, and madness is in their hearts while they live. And after that, they go to the dead. So this is him saying, yeah, we're all going to die. And while I'm talking about that subject, let me also point out the fact that while we're living, we got these hearts that are going astray, and madness is inside us. That word for the Hebrew word for madness is used elsewhere for corruption in society. It's used for folly. It's used for frivolity. It's used for a lot of other negative in a lot of other negative ways. So yeah, we're all going to die, and while we're on the way to dying, we're going to have many ways in which we're led astray, and we're going to probably also built in this is the idea that we're also going to engage in all sorts of trivial pursuits which try and anesthetize us to what is coming. Whether that's sex or drugs or alcohol or entertainment or whatever it is that people use to temporarily blind themselves to the fact that death is going to be their end.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I did want to point out something about this living dog, dead lion. It might, it probably doesn't strike us with quite the same force that it would
Well, we like
in the,
dogs.
yeah,
I mean, they're like our
in
pets.
this culture, because most of us would, if you say, would you prefer a living dog or a dead lion? And be like, well, of course. I mean, a living dog is the best, right? I want my dog to be with me. He's man's best friend, all this kind of stuff. Well, that doesn't work in this culture because dogs are used almost. There might be one exception, and that one exception is Lazarus and the rich man, where the dogs lick the sores that are on the poor man. Whether that's positive or negative, that might be the only positive image if they're his companions. But leaving that one aside, every image in the scriptures of dogs is negative.
Well, even the Lazarus one, I don't think it's saying anything bad about dogs per se, but like Lazarus is like in the street outside this guy's house, which is where dogs are. So if you were telling that parable today, you'd be like, okay, there's this guy and he's sitting on a trash heap or something, and the raccoons, I don't know, the armadillos are licking his. They're just like out there.
Rats,
Yeah, they're just out.
rats,
Yeah,
yeah,
they're just out there in the street because
yeah.
that's where they are.
Rats are probably a pretty good parallel because dogs were scavengers,
Yeah.
just problems to society, uh, avoided, best avoided. So they didn't have the same kind of positive image, of course, that we have. And so when he says a living dog is better than a dead lion, lions, we still refer to them as king of the beast, right? And that's where they were viewed in ancient times as well. So this lowliest of scavengers, this living dog, well, he's better off than the dead lion because at least he's still alive. And I want to say something too because I know that on social media when I talk about life after death or what happens to believers when they die or anything related to that subject, quite frequently this verse, which is verse 5, is quoted by people who argue that when you die, whether you're a believer or an unbeliever, then there's no consciousness afterward. They'll say they'll quote this line, the dead know nothing. And I think it's worth pointing out the fact that you okay, you can quote that, but when you quote it, realize the context in which this is said. This is life without the resurrection. This is
Yep.
life under the sun. This is Kohelet pointing out in the most negative way imaginable just what life is like and death is like if we have no hope apart from God in Christ. So this isn't a theologically factual statement that applies in every single circumstance. This is someone who is working from a non-resurrection theological perspective, talking about what life and death are like if we don't have that hope.
Yeah, this is a a statement that would be true if it was in fact the case that death has the final word. I mean, if death is the final thing, then yes, the dead know nothing.
Yes. So I mean, it's a one more example of how looking at verses in their context is crucial. So all that being said, these first 6 verses, let's see what he does recommend. And what he recommends begins here in verse 7. I'll read 7 through 10. Go, eat your bread with joy, and drink your wine with a merry heart, for God has approved what you do. Let your garments always be white, let not oil be lacking on your head. Enjoy life with the wife whom you love. Some have argued that just should be translated with a woman whom you love, and it is just the typical word for woman, but uh, probably what's happening here is he's talking about marriage. So most translations will render it as wife. Enjoy life with the wife whom you love all the days of your vain life that he has given you under the sun, because that is your portion in life and in your toil at which you toil under the sun. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your might, for there is no work or thought or knowledge or wisdom in Sheol, to which you are going.
Okay, so I've heard people try to like do like a positive thing here with this. I don't know. They try to gospel up like verse 7, so they'll be like, "Go eat your bread with joy and drink your wine with a merry heart, for God has already approved what you do in Christ." You're like, it's not what this is not at all the tone that he has here. What this approved even. I don't think it's not like that kind of approval. Like God is like super pleased with what you do or whatever. It's more like, at least this is how I read it, Chad. You can tell me if you see this differently. But look, just go eat your bread and just find enjoyment in that. Drink your wine, enjoy that. Have your heart be as merry as you could possibly make it, because God has already like appointed a thing for everyone. He's already approved the scope of your life, and there's nothing you could do about it. It's like if somebody, I take this approval thing as a more like if you were going to get a loan, or you're gonna sign the contract and that loan got approved, and you're like, okay, now this is approved. Now this is what it's going to be. Because then he does this whole thing like, hey, don't let's keep your clothes nice, because that's all you got. I mean, you might as well like keep that nice. You got that oil on your head, because you could see it right here in verse 9 though. Like where he's like, enjoy. He can't hide it, because he's like, enjoy life with the woman who you love all the days of your vain, stupid life. Like.
Yeah.
Like, come on, man. Like, this isn't like some kind of gospel-y thing. He's like, you got this worthless, meaningless, stupid thing called life. You might as well squeeze every drop out of it, because guess what? Like, it's all you've got.
Yeah, you can't. It's pretty hard to read these verses without hearing the tone of sarcasm that's in his voice.
Yeah, and I don't even know if he's like being insincere about it. It's just that he's like, hey, whatever your hand finds to do, man, do it hard. Like, go find something and go all the way with it. But just know that you're not taking it with you.
In the end, you're all going to die anyway. Yeah, and this is this isn't the first time he's used this language. This passage is different though. So this is the sixth. There's six passages usually referred to as the carpe diem passages in Ecclesiastes, seize the day passages. We saw the first one back in chapter 2, where he says, there's nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. Okay.
So here, here's the thing about that, Chad. Like that's exactly right. Like it is like a seize the day, but like not in the way that. So you and I might get up out of bed one day and have like an exciting task ahead of us, and be like, all right, man, today's the day that we do the thing that we've been planning to do, and it's going to be this great thing, and we're gonna. No, like think about this. Like there's nothing better than to do like this, than to just eat food and drink wine. There's like, well, that's depressing. Like there's nothing better. Like, yeah, that's all there is. Like so you might as well seize whatever you can, because this is all you get, right? And so it is sort of this call to, yeah, like live today to its fullest, because why? Because tomorrow's not promised, and if tomorrow's not promised, then tomorrow is just so happens to be the day that you go to Sheol. It's all over. Like so.
Yeah, which is why this one fits so well with that whole tone, because in the previous passages, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 5, he's talking about, he'll use language like this: there's nothing better, or I perceive that there's nothing better, or I saw that there's nothing better, or what I've seen to be good and fitting is such and such. Okay. Those are just like, they kind of come across as advice, right? Listen, this is what I've seen to be the good thing that we have. Now, this one's different, because when we get to verse 7, he switches from advice to imperative. And he says, in view of this, I'm not going to tell you what I've seen to be better. I'm simply going to tell you what to do. So he says, go. Based upon what I've said, here's what I'm telling you to do. Just go and eat your bread and drink your wine and enjoy life with your wife, because guess what? There's not going to be any work or thought or knowledge or wisdom, and we could add to that, or marriage, or eating bread, or drinking wine, or anything else when you end up in Sheol, to which you are going. And we could we could say that this verse 10, whatever your hand finds to do, do with your might. That's often used in it's kind of a positive spin is given to that, right? This is
Yeah.
probably one of the most well-known verses from Ecclesiastes. Whatever your hand, I mean, how many fathers have said this to their sons? And it's one of these where on a certain level, yeah, I mean it is true. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might.
Of course,
That's good. That's good.
unless it's finding something bad.
Yeah, right. Yes. Unless it's bad, then don't do that. But if you find something good to do, yeah, okay. I mean, as it stands, if you just kind of cut that out of the verse and place it, put it on a coffee cup or whatever. All right, it's true, but look at what else he says. That's only the first half of the verse. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. For there is no work or thought or knowledge or wisdom in Sheol to which you are going. Now, that second half is hardly ever quoted when that first half
Yeah, this
is quoted.
this just sounds like you got something you want to do, you better get after it because time is of the essence, right? Like you don't know if you get tomorrow. So if there's stuff you want to accomplish, great. Do it with vigor because there's no accomplishing things in the grave.
Yeah, yeah. To which we all are headed, he says.
Yep.
Okay, so that's the first 10 verses. I don't think these next ones are going to take us quite as long. We should be able to wrap up the chapter by the end of our time together. So I'm going to go ahead and read 11 through 17. Again, I saw that under the sun, the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to the intelligent, nor favor to those with knowledge. But time and chance happen to them all. For man does not know his time, like fish that are taken in an evil net, and like birds that are caught in a snare. So the children of man are snared at an evil time when it suddenly falls upon them. I have also seen this example of wisdom under the sun, and it seemed great to me. So this made a great impression on Solomon. He says, there was a little city with few men in it, and a great king came against it and besieged it and building great siege works against it. But there was found in it a poor wise man, and he by his wisdom delivered the city. Yet I laugh because this is so typical of Koheleth. Right when he seemed like he's giving you something, he takes it away. Yet no one remembered that poor man. But I say that wisdom is better than might, though the poor man's wisdom is despised and his words are not heard. The words of the wise heard in quiet are better than the shouting of a ruler among fools. Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroys much good. Now, if I had to summarize the kind of the overall tenor of these verses, there's like, one message that kind of comes through with all of these proverbs and this little parabolic story and whatnot, is that it's something like, wisdom is good. Just like he said, these all other things were good, like enjoying your marriage and eating your bread and drinking your wine. All of that's good. Wisdom is good too. Um, but it is by no means kind of the key that unlocks every door in life. I mean, it's better it's better to be wise than to be a fool, for sure. But as it turns out, it's by no means kind of the cure all for the things that happen to us. It's not going to save you from death. It's not going to tell you when you're going to die. And even if you do exhibit great wisdom, in fact, if you use wisdom and you do this great thing that is kind of a unexpected, well, people aren't going to remember it, and so it's not going to really make any difference in the long run. So this is, I mean, rather than kind of switching to something really more optimistic, this continues that same negative tenor that he started out the chapter with.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is that, like, of course, wisdom is better to be wise than a fool, but that wisdom doesn't guarantee you much, right? So it doesn't guarantee you riches. It doesn't guarantee you bread. It doesn't guarantee you any of those things. Like, perhaps it could increase your chances, but it doesn't guarantee it. And he's like, I've seen this play out before. That's all. I mean, and you see it from the very beginning of this illustration, where it's like there's a poor wise man. It's like, okay, so like one thing that could be true is that you could be poor and wise, because he says like chance has more to say about how things shake out with you than whether or not you're wise or a fool. And then basically it seems that he does this thing where he says the reason wisdom doesn't guarantee anything is because one sinner could destroy like every wise thing that you could possibly come up with.
Can you think of any examples where that's happened, though, Dan? I'm struggling here. I'm trying to think of where maybe one sinner has messed up everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It seems like that was at the very
Seemed like,
beginning of the book. I think we
yeah, it
covered
seemed
that.
like maybe the Bible, at the beginning has something to say to that. I was verse 11 made me think, this flies in the face of just basically every self-help book that's out there, because every self-help book out there basically works on the premise that if you plan properly and act according to your planning and just behave in whatever wise way the author is encouraging you, then you will have success. And God comes along and says, yeah, you know what I've seen? The race isn't to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to the intelligent, but time and chance happen in them all. So uh, he uh, he ends with utter frustration. There was I did like this. So this was one commentary quoted Romans 9:16. He says, Romans 9:16 says, "So then it depends not on human will or exertion, but on God who has mercy." And this expositor says, in other words, human inability drives Paul to divine grace, while Koheleth ends up in frustration,
Yeah.
which I thought was a pretty insightful there. So, on the one hand, you can say, well, if it's not, if the battle's not to the swift, nor bread to the wise, so on and so forth, then that drives us to God's grace. We throw ourselves upon His mercy. Koheleth just throws his hands up in the air in frustration, because to him it's like, well, then goodness, what's the point of it all, right?
It's
We're all going to be caught like birds in a snare eventually.
It seems like he like has experienced this thing where like maybe like you had this guy and he was like diligently planning and exercising every ounce of wisdom that he could muster. He had a great plan to build a life, and then like some sort of pestilence rolled through, took out his whole family, wiped everything out. Then there was like this really foolish guy that squandered all his life, and one day found, a quarter on the street and bought a lottery ticket and won. And he says, "Yeah, see, this is the thing about this. Like, you could do all the things, but you know what really affects things more than anything else? Chance. Is this guy that did this? Is it now wise to buy lottery tickets? Is that what it is? Because this guy bought one and won, or is it wise to do what I did, which is do all this planning and have it all taken away by something that's completely out of my control? This is like the great frustration."
Yeah, yeah. And thankfully, this isn't the final word. I mean, if it were, then yeah, I'd be throwing my hands up too and saying, "Well, forget it. I'm gonna go, lead the life of a hedonistic Viking and just,
Yeah.
enjoy the few years that I have here." So, thankfully, this is not the end. I mean, there is a resurrection turns everything he has said on its head, and actually infuses life with purpose and meaning, which is beyond our wildest imaginations. So hang on, Koheleth. There is resurrection to come.
Yeah, we're gonna get there. So he's just not there yet. You gotta go all the way down before you come out the other side. So, all right. Well, we are out of time. So we'll be back next week. He's gonna continue with this train of thought. He's not done talking about how death is just this looming thing that you can't shake and kind of taints everything. So we're gonna get into more of that next episode. Chad, I'll see you then.
See you then.